The conference hall glimmered with glass and gold, every eye on the stage, as the CEO stepped up to speak. His voice steady, practiced the sound of success, echoing off walls built by ambition. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward. This was his. World sharp, controlled, perfect. But as the doors at the back opened, all that perfection cracked in an instant. She walked in slowly, her hair tied back in a way he remembered too well, a quiet confidence in her step that once made his world feel small and safe. His chest tightened. His words faltered mid-sentence because beside her were two small children, a boy and a girl holding her hands wide-eyed, curious, like they had never been in a room so grand. The crowd shifted, whispering the photographers, lowering their cameras as the CEO went still, his mind spinning through years he'd buried under work and pride. He blinked hard once, twice, but the truth didn't change. They looked just like him, the same eyes, the same smile, and it hit him like a wave he'd never seen coming. She didn't look away, not once, her gaze steady, full of things she'd never said and things he'd never wanted to hear. The little boy tugged her sleeve, whispering, "Mom, is that the man from the picture?" She bent down and said softly, "Yes, baby, that's him." His throat closed, his breath catching somewhere between disbelief and guilt. His assistant whispered, "Sir, are you all right?" But he couldn't answer, couldn't move. The world that worshipped him blurred, until only her face remained, and the two tiny lives beside her. When the applause began again, he didn't hear it. He only saw the years between them, the nights he thought she'd moved on. The silence that had never made sense until now. He took a step forward, eyes fixed on her, voice breaking as he whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear, "Why didn't you tell me?" Her hand tightened around the children's as he approached the room, still buzzing, though no one dared speak too loud. His voice trembled between anger and shock. "Why didn't you tell me they existed?" She met his eyes, steady, calm, but wounded. "You were already gone before I even knew you chose your world, and I chose to survive in mine." He flinched, her words cutting. "Deeper than any scandal ever could, I had a right to know." She shook her head softly. "You had every right to care, but rights mean nothing without love. You built an empire from ambition and left no space for a family, not even for us." The little girl tugged her dress, whispering, "Mommy, can we go home soon?" And the sound of that small voice shattered him. He knelt slowly, his heart pounding, looking at the children who stared back at him, curious, cautious, innocent. "What are their names?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, then whispered Eli and Grace. His lips parted around their names like a prayer he never knew he'd been waiting to say. He looked up at her, eyes raw. "You raised them alone?" She nodded barely, holding back tears. "Alone. But loved he won't. Remember you, and she shouldn't have to. That was the deal I made with myself." He stood again, shaking his head. "I thought walking away was the smart choice, that love was a distraction, but seeing them now, I realize it was everything." He glanced at the children again, the mirror of his own soul staring back at him. She whispered painfully, "It's too late for sorry." He took a deep breath, maybe, but not too late to start. The words hung between them, fragile, trembling, alive. He followed them out of the hall, the sound of cameras fading behind him, replaced by the quick steps of two small feet and the quiet beat of a heart he no longer recognized. She turned sharply in the corridor, her voice shaking. "You shouldn't have followed us. This isn't your world anymore." He stopped, breathing hard. "My world stopped feeling like mine the second I saw them." The children peeked from behind her legs, the little boy curious, the girl shy. He crouched down slowly, his voice soft. "Hi, I'm—" He hesitated, not knowing what to call himself to them. She saved him from the silence. "You're their father, whether they know it or not." He swallowed hard, his throat dry. He looked at them again, at the boy's nervous frown, at the way the girl clutched a small toy bear, and it hit him what he had missed. Birthdays, scraped knees, bedtime stories, all the things money could never buy. He whispered to her, "I didn't know how to be a husband back then, but maybe I can try to be a father now." Her eyes softened, for a heartbeat, then turned guarded again. "You think you can walk back into our lives just because you feel guilty?" He shook his head. No, because for the first time I feel human. The boy stepped forward, holding out the toy bear. This is Mr. Buttons. He's brave when I'm scared. The CEO smiled faintly, kneeling lower. That's a good name. He's a strong bear just like you. The boy grinned shyly, and something in that smile undid every wall he'd built around his heart. She watched them, her chest tightening as the moment unfolded before her. One she'd imagined and feared all at once. He looked up at her, voice trembling. Let me earn their trust, even if I never earn yours. Her lips parted, but no words came, just the truth she could know. Longer deny weeks turned into months, and true to his word, he didn't vanish this time. He showed up at school events, at piano lessons at the park, where Eli tried to climb the tallest slide, and Grace insisted on feeding the ducks, even when the rain started to fall. He never came with bodyguards or briefcases, only with open hands and quiet patience. At first, the children didn't know what to make of him, the man from the picture who suddenly came to life. But he learned their rhythms, their laughter, their fears. He learned how Eli liked to count stars before bed, and how Grace only slept if someone whispered stories about heroes who didn't give up. When work called, he silenced the phone. When investors complained, he told them family comes first, and for once he meant it. One evening, she came to the door to find him sitting on the porch, both kids asleep in his arms, the sun melting into gold behind them. He looked up and smiled, tired but peaceful. I think they finally trust me, she whispered. They already did, you just never stayed long enough to see it. He looked at her for a long moment, the air warm between them. I thought success was about being remembered by the world, he said quietly, but now I only want to be remembered by them. Her eyes shimmered as she whispered softly, then keep showing up and maybe you will be. He nodded, then looked down at the children breathing evenly against his chest, and something like hope bloomed inside him for the first time in years. Year later, the same city that once printed headlines about his wealth now whispered stories about his change. No scandals, no rumors, just quiet awe at the man who had traded power for presence. He no longer ran an empire from a glass tower he built, something smaller, something warmer. A foundation that helped single parents start again, dedicated in the names of Eli and Grace. That night, under soft golden lights, the three of them stood together at the opening ceremony. She held the children's hands on one side and he stood on the other, no longer a stranger, no longer lost. The cameras flashed, but for once he didn't care what the world saw, only what stood beside him. The family he thought he'd lost forever. When the speeches ended, he bent down to whisper to Eli and Grace. You two are the reason I finally learned what strength really means. Grace giggled, wrapping her arms around his neck. Eli smiled wide. You're not busy anymore, right? He laughed softly, shaking his head. Not anymore. Not ever again. She watched him, her heart full and trembling. He turned to her quietly, eyes shining. I can't rewrite the years I missed, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure you never face another alone. She stepped closer, her voice whisper. Then don't just promise stay. He smiled, the kind of smile that once only lived in memories, and she finally saw the man she used to love, the one who'd found his way back, not through money or regret, but through love that refused to quit. And, as the lights dimmed around them, he lifted their children into his arms, the four of them framed against the glow of a new beginning. If this story moved you, share it, so others never forget that one selfless act can rewrite a destiny in ways no one sees coming.